Hi, it's Lauren. Thank you so much for listening to The Afterlight. All right, I'm joined today by Cassandra Knight. She is a professional clairvoyant, astrologer, and tarot reader. Throughout her 28-year career, she has performed readings for many people from all walks of life. Her astrology columns and feature articles have appeared in various newspapers and magazines, ranging from the Herald Sun to Elle. Cassandra enjoys helping her clients by providing practical and constructive support and advice. She is proficient in many different fields of expertise and can offer clients a combination of services in one reading to give an in-depth holistic analysis. She loves working with women in business and starting one that wishes to align their life purpose, talents, and challenges to achieve life and business success. I am joined now by Cassandra, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yes. Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me on.
So, your bio is pretty impressive, I've got to say.
Yes. Well, I guess I've been sort of doing it a long time, and I've had some interruptions at the beginning when I had my son, but then it's sort of followed through my most of my adult life. It's been, my vocation, I guess.
It's pretty cool. I love, talking to people who've been able to align their passion with what they do in business. And it sounds like that's what you do for yourself and also what you've been able to do for other people as well through the work that you do.
Yes, I just find it just adds that level of fulfillment when you can understand what that is for you. And I guess I've been lucky to be able to have that in my life and to unlock that for other people. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm aware that astrology is a bit of a complicated, sort of, well, I don't know, is it a science or not? I'm going to find out about that in a second. But I do want to know a bit about how your astrology journey started. How did your foray into that world get kicked off?
I guess from when I was quite young, I think I was probably about 10, 11, I remember just wanting to know everybody's their birthday so I can work out what their sun sign is. And then I got more curious when I was probably about in year 8, and I came across Linda Goodman's sun sign astrology book. And of course, with the girlfriends, we'd be looking up everybody's sun sign.
I have that book too.
You have that book too?
Yeah.
I think it's a staple of the 80s.
Yeah.
Beyond. And I remember one girl saying to me, "Oh, you're an Aries, and that means that you're, very bossy and not very nice." And I remember being sort of a bit kind of taken aback, thinking, no, that's not all of me or me. And so it made me sort of more curious to think, hang on a sec, there's more to this than meets the eye. How can we all just fit into 12 categories in our character? And then I did a little bit more investigating and realised that I had a sun and moon in Pisces, so it made me a lot more sensitive, or particularly to know what people would say about me. And that made me think, okay, there's more to this than just the sun signs. And of course, I was only in year 8, and I didn't have the, opportunity or the will really to go deeply into it. So it came about again when I was in my early 20s. I was already on my path of being a tarot reader and really interested in many metaphysical subjects, trying to work out, my place in the cosmos. And I ended up, I've had the beauty in my life that I've had a lot of synchronicity, things that have come at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I had moved to Tasmania, and I had one really good friend, and she was the one who actually, again, it was a book that we both bought because we both had this interest in astrology. And we tried to, this was before the time of computers where you could just print out charts within seconds. And we tried to work out how to do the mathematics of doing a chart through this book. And we realized it was beyond, we just couldn't work it out. So that was a real hindrance to, understanding more of our own charts. And she happened to have a friend who was a teacher in part-time with her husband. And from there, we were able to become students with her and her husband. And that was my beginning of the passion for astrology, really getting stuck into it, understanding it. And I could share that with my friends. So we sort of lived and breathed it. So that's where it started. And from there, I have, it's helped me my own life in understanding myself and breaking patterns and feeling better about when things were really difficult in my life. And helping my clients as well through my work as a tarot reader, but also as an astrologer, to understand their own lives and the patterns that sort of come out through when you understand your natal chart.
I was going to say that, that's quite a benefit to you to have the psychic, working for you at the same time as doing the astrology. You're kind of coming at it from almost a scientific point of view when you look at how everything's aligned. And then you have your intuitive ability as well, which comes to support and almost add in some parts that might be missing. Do you think so?
I think there is, of course, you'll understand all the basics and the meanings, and there is an art form to interpreting the chart, and there is an intuitive side as well to be able to have a sense of how something might play out for a person or how they might experience it. But it's not so much that's not coming from the rational mind, but maybe the intuitive, where you get impressions and feelings. It is very handy, I must say.
Yeah. So I want to find out a bit more about astrology and what it is exactly. You've mentioned natal charts, so I guess we'll talk about that probably, shortly anyway. But is astrology considered to be a science?
Not these days. It's more a metaphysical science. If we take it back to ancient times, the astrologers were the first scientists before, there were sophisticated instruments to measure the, physical world. In ancient times, they were the original scientists who tried to understand the environment by looking at the stars, the planets, the moon, the sun, the seasons, and how that affected them. Maybe, then it was whether they're going to have a good crop or when to actually plant things, how it affected their society at the time. And it was used more for predicting things to do with the rulers rather than individuals, because people didn't necessarily have, a much choice in their lives. They were tended to be restricted by who was their ruler at the time.
Right.
And I guess through time, it's gone through many phases. During, Renaissance time, a lot of the scientists were also astrologers. And it sort of went hand in hand. And a lot of things like medicine they come from astrology in some ways. I don't mean our modern medicine, but how people in that time understood health, particularly things like the humours and the elements. And I guess that the discovery of more precise instruments to measure, the cosmos and the sky, really created that schism as well, I guess, separating astrology from science, and it became more a sort of a metaphysical pursuit, particularly in our day and age. It's more sort of with understanding the spiritual side of the person and how that how they live it out in the world.
So when I think of astrology, I've always looked, I mean, I read Linda Goodman's book, and, I've always read my horoscope as well. And it's funny how, sometimes when I've read horoscopes to other people, they'll go, oh, that doesn't make any sense at all. And it could be because there are other, things that play. Planets are in different alignment. Maybe they're not fully true with that particular sun sign. So you kind of alluded to it earlier when you talked about your natal chart, but I guess astrology is not just your horoscope. It's more than that.
Well, it's interesting. Horoscope actually means your actual natal chart. So
there you go.
horoscope in the paper, they've adopted that name for it, but it's not actually, I guess, what the original meaning of horoscope is.
Oh, funny.
So I guess to make the distinction, the horoscope that you read in the paper is sun sign astrology, which is really just breaking everyone up into 12 signs. And your horoscope is your chart, the chart that you're casting is also called a horoscope.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is really the study of patterns and relationships of the planets in motion, and how that like you'll set your individual chart, which is based on the time you were born, the place, and the date. And then as you're looking at the chart in time, as you're developing as a person, you're looking at that, how the planets in motion relate to your natal chart, which is like your unique stamp or blueprint of your journey.
Can two people have the same natal chart?
Yes, I do. Like twins, although twins might have a few minutes between each other, and there are obviously people born on the same time, same place.
Yeah.
But there would be people with the same chart, but they'd have to be born in the same place, same time, and same date. So
that would be fascinating to see if you could find those people and to see the chart, like where their life went and how they're similar, or how they use different skills to do different things. That would just be an interesting book to read.
I think the closest I've come to that would be twins. And looking at twins and how they for one twin, they're more like they can sort of express one part of the chart or develop it more than the other. And there's obviously similarities, but they may choose through their own free will to, concentrate on a particular strength or move through a particular sort of challenge. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I find that interesting too.
Like you can get, the shy twin and the more outgoing one, and how that can play out in the chart.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what kind of things can people use their chart for? What kind of information can they glean from it?
Okay, there's so much. It's because it's like the blueprint of your soul journey, as we say. And so you can really, one beautiful quote that I have here from Llewellyn George, a famous astrologer from the early century, last century, was very much about there's sort of no sense in blindly following your so-called fate. We should learn to direct it. So that I kind of really like that quote, in that we're not sort of here to just blindly think, well, this is a really static thing called our natal chart and we're just going to follow it and our life's going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's very boring. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a difference almost between taking responsibility and going with the flow at the same time, as opposed to just letting life happen to you.
Yeah. So, and I guess that's there's a power in that if we have have that sense that we are sort of the driver of our destiny. okay, we are given, another, I guess, analogy would be we're given these seeds specific to us, and we're sowing the seeds in a particular environment, and depending how we tend to our garden, so to speak, is how successful we're going to be.
Yeah.
And in that as well is thrown what's happening around us and what challenges we come across to either hinder or help this process. So getting back to how it can help us, it gives us real insight into ourselves, how we fit into the world. It can give us that wisdom on a metaphysical sort of system of what's our soul journey and development. And it can also give us meaning for our lives as well, and where it doesn't seem all just random and chaos. That there seems to be some kind of meaning and system and understanding.
So can astrology tell you, your strengths and sort of help you when you are making maybe career choices or deciding to embark on, even places in the world that maybe you should travel to, for example? Can it get that sort of niche down?
It really can, like particularly for things like, say, finding your vocation. Now, it may not say become an engineer, but it may say, hey, you've got this real ability to be analytical and have very, structured way of using your mind to solve problems, and you're more drawn towards creating order and having answers and fixing things. And that might come through having, a good Saturn, a good Jupiter, a good Mercury. And it would be placed in a particular part of your chart. For instance, your 10th house, which is about your career. It can be about what you have to give to the world, in a sense, or how others in the world see you. And it can be vocation, or it can be your career, but not everybody necessarily has a career, but it can show, okay, what are you giving to the world of yourself? Right. And for some people it might be, that they do charitable work, or that they're wonderful parents and supporters of others, and that can come out in the chart as well. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention about, there's a lot of branches of astrology. One is a cartography, and it places your chart on a world map, and it can show sort of that particular energy manifesting in that country. And for me specifically, I have Venus going through New Zealand, and I remember thinking, one of my first boyfriends was from New Zealand, and Venus is the planet of love. And it was a very, lovely experience. And I remember when I learned astrology, I went, oh, wow, that really fits. And then later when I got to visit, to go to New Zealand years later, it was a place I felt really happy and that I loved.
Yeah.
And another one was I have Mercury in going through Greece, and that's a place where my parents were born, and Mercury is about language, so I am bilingual. So that kind of fitted in too, that I had this Mercury sort of playing out in that country.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, so it is really interesting sort of study. There's lots of different branches of astrology.
It's funny because I've gone to places before and I just felt like I belonged there. So yeah. I'm sure many of our listeners have had that experience as well. And it'd be interesting to see whether or not there's a correlation with their chart, whether, in fact, there's something working for you in that area of the world that would enable you or would inspire you to feel that way.
Yes. And it is really interesting, particularly for people that have done a lot of traveling. So you can say, oh, yes, does that fit with you or not?
Yeah.
I know I have these very sort of difficult planets in my own chart, they go through the west coast of America. And I remember a friend wanting me to come and go travel with him to, at the time, Los Angeles. And I went, oh, I don't think I really want to go. I don't want to test that one out.
And whereas everyone else who doesn't know, they just blindly go there. And
I mean, it may have not happened, but you know, it was very sort of difficult planets that could manifest in violence and I thought, well, I don't really want to test that. It probably would have just been that we would have had fought and not got along or something.
Yeah.
But I didn't live to tell that. I mean, didn't go down that path. So
but you also, because you knew that, you might have manifested that.
True. Yeah. I mean that's the thing though, isn't it, where you have choice. I could have been mindful of that and thought, well, I better not get into arguments or be more mindful and stay safe, rather than blaming it on the stars and saying, oh, well, this, you know, Mars Uranus agitating energy means we're going to have a fight.
Yeah, that's right. So you take responsibility for your reactions when times get tough in that scenario. Yeah, I like that. So, you know, that kind of brings me to the question, I guess, about free will in relation to astrology. And, you know, can you sort of override your, you know, your blueprint if you wanted to?
I believe that if we're, you know, if we have this sort of soul consciousness and we don't want to be necessarily bound by our restrictions, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, that we can override it. But it takes sort of incredible insight, discipline, understanding, spiritual evolution to do that. And but it's possible, yes. Yeah, I do believe that.
I guess in a free will world, anything is possible. I mean, we're taught that all the time.
Yeah, but I guess most of us don't have that conviction, that will, that insight to go beyond our restrictions, our limitations, and that's where, you know, astrology can say, well, this is what you can potentially do. This is where you can get stuck and bogged down and just repeat patterns.
Can astrology predict the future, Cassandra? Yeah.
I don't believe anything can predict the future. You know, it can give you a sense of the energies ahead and how they might manifest. Like, I'll give you an example. We had a really strong planetary configuration earlier on this year with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. And that's a really strong energy that doesn't happen very often, because Pluto and Saturn, they move slowly, particularly Pluto. It takes 276 years to go through the zodiac. So there were a lot of astrologers who were going, oh, okay, well, how is this going to manifest? We knew that it was going to create upheaval with stability, our structures, governments, because Capricorn does rule sort of, well, rules and governments and structures. And Pluto is very much about bringing about enormous change in order for rebirth, for things to, to be able to, you know, make new out of the old, to get rid of. And the interesting thing was we had Jupiter, I think that was around April, where Jupiter, whatever it touches, is about excess or expansive. So we had this other configuration with Mars and Jupiter hitting this configuration. And that's when
fascinating,
we had the pandemic. And so I don't think anyone really sat there and said, this is going to be a pandemic, and predicted it exactly as it is, but all the ingredients were there. and it manifested in a way that,
Yeah.
hey, it has affected our economies, our governments, our everyday life.
It's interesting how, when you're talking, that made me feel that if you're across, where the planets are sitting at a particular time, you might be prepared for, technology to fail or people to be a bit agitated. So you're almost more prepared in the world to deal with all of these things. Whereas the rest of us are like, I don't know what's happening. But you go, well, it's because this planet was around and this planet. So
yeah, well, that's really true. On the weekend where we had a full moon and a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, and Mars was hitting it off, and it was a really tense time. And I remember thinking, I just want to hide. I don't want to be, I'm just not going to sort of push it, because there was a lot of tension. People were on edge, and we saw it worldwide with protests. And Sagittarius is about what's right, seeking truth, breaking down belief. So it was all happening, in the world. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm just going to hide little old me.
Yeah, that's amazing though, because at the time of recording, the Black Lives Matter movement has really, gone all over the world. There are rallies and protests all over, and it's amazing. It must be amazing for you to know this stuff and then see it enacted in the world and the environment around you.
Well, it is wonderful. It fits so nicely with sociology, really, the study of human beings as a group. It also, there's another branch of astrology it's called Mundane Astrology, and it looks at politics and countries. So it is this amazing tool where you can understand so many things about life, whether it's, countries, societies, and the cycle of human beings throughout the ages as well. There's even an understanding of, say, ancient worlds and what was going on for them, and how at this time we are more in an age of Aquarius, and that's not just the 60s, but it is sort of more far-reaching. It's like a 25,000 year cycle of the zodiac. So when you're kind of thinking that sort of huge time frame, it helps you to see that there is this evolution of human beings and our time on Earth and how we're evolving. And it can really blow your mind pretty much, Laura.
Yeah,
It did blow mine out when I sort of started to study it. And it's an amazing system.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you're constantly validated as well when these things happen, and when you understand the connections and then you see it unfold. I mean, that would just feel constant validation for the work that you're doing and the knowledge you have.
Yeah, and also that, it's not just like, you still have this wonder that, oh, that's worked out this way. For instance, Uranus is the planet that when it hits things in the world, it really surprises us. Like, we think we've got it all worked out, and Uranus comes along and goes, here we go, this is going to blow you out. You think you know everything. But it's called the mind of God, in a sense, enlightening human beings to see things beyond their perception. So it's kind of, it's always growing, and you're learning, and we're evolving. It's not this fixed thing.
Yeah. Well, especially with, the world and the planets and everything is moving. I mean, it's obvious they're moving. So there's going to be something that happens with that. Can we talk a little bit, Cassandra, about the moon?
Yeah, well, the moon is really interesting in that, okay, it's got, 28-day cycle in the sky, and it affects the, so there's tides on Earth, and they say that it affects human beings because we're made up of, I think, 95% water or something like that. I don't know physiologically if that's true. But definitely, it's even been documented that people do tend to get more emotional and heightened around full moons. And the moon is supposed to govern our emotions and our day, like how we monthly, I guess, cycles for women as well. So there seems to be, if we're not necessarily in our rational minds, the moon does affect our emotions, subconscious self, our habits, our fears sometimes. So yeah, I feel like the moon is very sort of powerful in that way.
I don't have a source for this comment, but I have heard in my travels that, you know, emergency rooms tend to fill up more during a full moon,
Yes,
which I
I've
always
heard
thought
that
was
too.
interesting.
And also mental health emergencies in particular, where people seem to be really agitated, in places like, say, dementia patients tend to be more agitated around a full moon. I've sort of read bits and pieces. I've actually asked just out of curiosity, I asked one of the nurses at where my mum was in a nursing home if that was true, and she said that it did seem to have a correlation there with the full moon.
I was thinking these nurses and doctors and stuff, they all should take an astrology course. So they should have an astrology reading so that it can be flagged.
I don't think they need one.
You need to have extra staff on these days.
Yeah, they're knowing, they can feel it before it happens. They're going, oh no, we know it's coming.
Yeah, there's a grumbling in the earth.
Yep, that's it.
So are there things coming up, you know, at the moment of recording this? It's June 11th, 2020. So it's difficult because we never know when people are going to be listening to the podcast because it's evergreen and stays forever. But I would be interested in knowing, you know, for our listeners who get to hear this pretty soon, whether or not there's anything coming in the next maybe 6 months that people should be ready for. Because I'm sure there's a lot of unrest in the world and people are probably looking for a bit of a break.
Yeah, well, so June until I think mid-July, we've got 2 lunar eclipses and a solar eclipse. So the next 4 to 6 weeks are going to be a little bit intense for all of us emotionally. So I think the Black Lives Matter, that probably won't settle down for a few weeks. It'll be more like mid-July. And then talking about that other configuration that happened earlier in January and April that coincided with the pandemic, there's another, because the planets appear to go backwards, they don't actually go backwards. It's just how we're orbiting the planets, and it looks like we're going backwards. That's called retrograde. So what can happen is that comes about again, the same sort of energy coming up again at the end of June, and then again 12th of November. So that might be again a time when the pandemic, we might have like the second wave. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
It may manifest in that way.
Yeah.
It can also be unrest around politics as well. Jupiter also connected to politics.
Oh, you know, it's interesting. Yes. The U.S. election. The U.S. election is in November. And I'm Canadian for our listeners at home. I'm not. Just in case they thought that was part of what. No, I just know that because the whole world knows that. So that's interesting, Cassandra.
Really interesting. And America was founded around about 276 years ago. So they're going through a Pluto return. Pluto's going to the same position, sort of. I mean, the same sign that when they were founded. So for them, it's going to be a total transformation and change. We don't know how it's going to work out, but I think we all have a sense that, yeah, they're heading towards, they're going to look like a different country.
Yeah, well, and the US is such an impactful country on the whole world
Absolutely.
that whatever
Yeah.
shift and change they go through, because we did learn earlier in the conversation that Pluto is all about getting people to think a different way, isn't it? Gives you a different
Pluto is
insight or
usually,
challenges you.
it usually is about sort of breaking down the old to make way for new. So it usually
Okay.
has really profound effects. They're not necessarily all of a sudden. It can be like a build up, and then a volcanic explosion. That's the best way I can explain it. Like
Mm,
there's always the rumblings going on with a volcanic explosion, and then suddenly it all comes out. And it's very similar sort of energy. Pluto actually rules volcanic eruptions. So,
oh my God.
so
And that's
it's like,
around November too, you said.
yeah, so there's like, we've
Wow.
felt the rumblings, over the past 2 years. Something is coming. It's not
Wow.
to be feared. I think that's what
Yeah.
astrology has helped me to understand, that everything is cyclic, that we might go through a really difficult cycle, but then we come out of it and there is growth, there is positive things. And then, yes, we might go through this tumultuous time where it turns everything upside down. But then there's opportunity for regrowth, like the
Yeah.
phoenix coming out of the ashes. It's a similar sort of thing, rebirth.
That's such a beautiful visual. I just love that when people bring that up because it's so clear in your mind's eye when you can see, the phoenix rising from the ashes and just the beauty from that. It's going to be a fascinating ride. I can tell you that much for us to watch this all unfurl and to see what happens.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. And to be, it really is, probably going to be one of the biggest times in our lifetime for us,
Yeah.
Lauren.
Well, that's
When,
saying much because we're super young. So,
well, you are, yes. I still feel young, but yes, it's going to be those sort of defining moments. I always
yeah.
think of my parents going through World War II, or my grandparents actually going through the Depression, World War II in Europe, and thinking, gosh, that really defined their lives and what happened afterwards. And I remember my mother saying to me, oh, you're going to have this wonderful child, because I migrated to Australia, and she would say, oh, you're going to have this wonderful, childhood and your early years. My mum was a bit psychic too, I believe.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you might be like your grandparents where, they had a difficult time in their middle years. And now I look back and I think, your mum, you knew something there. She had this sort of understanding.
But that being said, going back to what you said before, well, I always like to use the example of, before you have to break down to break through, or at a breakdown, you can break
Absolutely.
through. And,
Oh,
yeah, we're going through some unrest, but, for me, I'm of the mindset that it's long overdue.
yeah,
And I'm so happy to see these shifts happening. And
absolutely.
yeah, and I'm excited for what's to
Mm,
come. And I don't live in the US or anything, but my family's in Canada, so North America is going to be affected, and then still on the world stage. And that being said, it's the catalyst for, I think, a bigger change worldwide anyway.
that's it.
All these
Yeah.
shifts that are happening, and we
Mm,
can't, I don't think we can grow as humans and as souls if we keep doing the same thing, the same way. It's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. If you don't take responsibility for your life essentially will just pass you by. And,
that's right.
this is part of that. This is part of, yeah, people standing up for a better world. And, our listeners on the Afterlight, they're listening because they know there's more than just
Yeah.
right now and our human selves, or they're figuring that out for themselves if they don't think that.
Yeah. And we really are growing. We can't stay static. There's no going back to the
Yeah.
good old days, which don't exist anyway. We've got to look forward and trying to create a better, more interesting world. That's our journey as human beings on Earth, and our soul journey, I believe.
Yeah, I believe that too. So, can you tell me or maybe share, some stories or examples of where you've seen astrology helped people? I know that you work with a variety of clients, but I know that you do specialize working with female entrepreneurs. Did you have any, kind of memorable experiences that stood out where you've seen astrology really help somebody, why confidence
Sure.
or make a decision or whatever?
I remember in that sort of early on, probably maybe 15 years ago, one of my clients, she was really searching for a change in her career. At the time, she was a photographer, and she was quite successful. She'd been working for 20 years as a photographer, and she just felt that there was some more. She wanted to do something else. She didn't quite know what it was, and she came and had a reading. And I remember saying to her, look, you have this amazing ability to be able to help others to really break old patterns and old habits and help to heal in some way. And it was all about the sort of the subconscious. I was looking at her moon and Mars and Chiron, and she was one of these people that she had this could really have. She was very good at communicating and very clear. And I said to her, looking at something to do with counselling or healing, and particularly connected to the subconscious mind. And something like sort of hypnotherapy. I didn't say that at the time, but it ended up a few years later, she came and told me how I really influenced her to take that path and start studying hypnotherapy and meditation. And she has found it really satisfying, and it's helped her to heal certain blocks within herself as well. She found it was this wonderful way she could unlock certain blocks within herself by helping others. And that's very much a Chiron thing of the wounded healer, where you're helping others, you're helping yourself by helping others. So that was a wonderful sort of confirmation there that it sort of helped her to find, to even really consider something like that, because she wasn't really thinking of that. But then later it ended up being just the right thing for her. And she, to this day, I think still is working in that field.
It's funny because sometimes, I'm sure it's happened to everyone where someone plants a seed and it germinates, and all of a sudden, it sprouts this whole life. So, for example, I wanted to originally be on TV for doing news, and
Yeah.
my mother thought I was suited to the radio, not because of how I look or anything, just because in radio school we always had jokes about how we have face for radio. Anyway,
Radio,
but but and then over the years, and now I'm doing a podcast, 20 years after I went to radio school, or 18 years or something like that. But it's funny how somebody's validating you or somebody's planting a seed. That woman would have been open to a change in her life, and you presented her with a couple of choices that for whatever reason just resonated in her soul.
And I really believe that timing, that's even for her to be attracted to me, to see me at that time, that's all the synchronicity as well tied into that.
Yeah. There's always, I know you said synchronicities. It's funny because do you say coincidences or synchronicities over coincidences? I mean, we know there's a divine plan. That's basically what I'm trying to say. I'm rambling here, but
I am a fan of Jung, the psychologist. Or psychiatrist, sorry.
Yeah.
And his theories of synchronicity, that I guess that sort of divine guidance, that there are sort of signs and things line up. That's kind of ruled my life. I've had so many profound synchronicities to the point where I feel like it's a bit of a cosmic joke, because the things that have happened.
I
think, what are the chances?
That's wonderful. And I bet you anything, you have gratitude every time those things happen, and that's why they keep happening.
They do, that's right. And also, I
Yeah.
think it's that Aries part of me that has the courage to go, yes, I'm going to jump in. It looks mad, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And I'm an Aries too, so I totally get that. And when you said at the beginning where you're talking about your friends saying you're bossy, I had someone send me a quote a little while ago and it said, I'm not bossy, I just have great ideas.
Yeah, I believe that. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's like you might, and you're not, that's the thing, you're not necessarily bossy in all areas of your life. Like for me, it wasn't at school, it was more at home. I was the eldest and I was bossy with my sibling, and she will attest to that.
So am I.
She used to call me the queen. Can I speak to you now? In the outside world, which is like your ascendant, your moon, I was a Pisces, so I was more sort of quiet in the background, blended in. People saw a softness there.
Mm.
And that's in your earlier years, that's usually how you come across. It's through your moon and your rising sign. So it's really, yeah, it's been amazing. I've loved it. And I keep loving it.
Yeah, but
So
I love this discussion because it's made me look at astrology in a totally new way. And even just talking about how the constant flow, for me, I mean, we did talk about how we're not static, and everything is just shifting and evolving. And, it's kind of, it sounds to me that when you know some of the stuff that you're preparing yourself to be okay. I know that, there might be some challenges coming up. I'm going to be really hyper aware of how I react to
yeah.
them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it really helps us, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to find balance in life, trying to get through the ups and downs and not, drown, or we're just trying to keep afloat, really. Excuse all the cliches there, but I think we are.
Yeah, but it's true.
That's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do in
Trying to
life.
find peace.
Yeah. And like surf, surf those waves, go through the ups and downs and try and go with that flow. I think surfers do talk about that, where they're in the zone
Yeah.
and they have like a transcendental experience when they're out at sea and they're riding that wave, and they are so in tune with the force of that wave. I find that a really powerful metaphor.
I do too.
How we operate in life. Like if we aware of that energy, which some people might call, say, the chi or the prana in yoga, if we're aware of that and that energy flow, we can harness it and work with it and enhance our lives, our health, our journey.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, when you're not flowing, that's when your synchronicities or your coincidences, that's
Yes,
when those stop. And
true.
so when you get these validations, where you get your little signs, or when you're thinking of a song and it plays on the radio, or when you think of a friend and you run into them at the grocery store, whatever the case may be, those are, for me, I like to remind people to pay attention to the golden nuggets in your life, because those are your signposts.
Absolutely. They're so
Yeah.
important. And we have that real aha moment. It helps us to connect to our spiritual selves. We
Yeah.
have that feeling that, okay, I'm on track. Or
Yeah.
some people call it their guides, giving them messages and whatever your terminology is. We do have a feeling. There's something that happens for us at those times. Not
Yeah.
just mentally, but we have a knowing, a feeling, which I think is very powerful.
A validation that you are where you're meant to be.
Yes.
Yeah. We have about 10 minutes left in our talk today. I did want to ask you some, other questions sort of off topic if, you're open to that. But I wanted to make sure that I covered off everything you wanted to discuss about, astrology before we launched into that.
It's been wonderful to be able to explain how I use astrology, how I see it, my
Yeah.
understanding of it, that it is just wonderful to give us that insight, wisdom, and perspective in our lives.
I feel that, when you talk about it, though, it reminds me that we're supported and that there's a blueprint that we're working with. And if we're lost or we're confused or we want validation, that there's a tool that can help you to say, hey, you're on your way, or keep this in mind,
Absolutely. And it can help us to plan as well, that we understand that there are cycles within cycles. And that's when we look at the planets, it helps us to understand, okay, at this stage of our lives, it's going to be more useful for us to do these things or to focus on these things. And for some people, it's not all the same. Like if I give you an example, for me in my early days, it was really important to me to have life experiences and have to really explore ideas and different lifestyles. And say for other people that I knew that were my peers, it was maybe more important for them to develop their careers or have, buy a house, have a family. And when I could understand, years later in my 30s, when I look back and I went, okay, I didn't do these things, but it fits in with who I am and what I needed to do as a person. And it just gave me an understanding that everyone has a different path. And if you have a view of it, it helps you to be more accepting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also helped me to, I guess, harness other things in my life so I could start becoming more secure. Then it became about security and stability.
Yeah. After you had all your fun.
Yeah, after I had all my fun, yeah.
But, I think we do compare, and you do need to work at not doing that sometimes. It's natural to do that. And I think that when you remember that you're on your own journey, that unless you have a twin and they're identical to you, you're not on the journey on the same journey as anyone else. And, I don't know if you read the book, The Four Agreements, but it's a fabulous little read. It's so worth reading. And it's one of those books that, I can't keep on my shelf, because every time I buy a copy, I find someone who actually needs it more than me and I give it to them. But one of the things that it talks about is, not taking anything personally, because you were born to different parents at a different time than I was. So we're already not on the same, playing field.
Yeah.
So, if you say that, yeah, I'm great, and someone else says that I suck, well, who's right? So,
well, even in, within families, you see siblings taking different paths, and, they had the same upbringing, but one took one path, another took the other, and they're very different people. So even within own families. So, yeah, we are individuals. We have our own blueprint.
Yeah.
There is a sense to our lives as well, which I think, like you say, is comforting.
Yeah, I love that. What's one of your favorite books, Cassandra?
You mean
in general, whatever. I always like to find out because I'm such a voracious reader.
I don't know, because I go through phases, I think.
Yeah, what are you reading right now?
Oh, at the moment, I'm reading one of Dr. Despoise's books about how you can break your habits.
Oh.
And really, he talks about, he goes into quantum physics, and I don't know, I
love talking about that. I actually love talking about that.
Because my son is actually studying physics, and when I talk to him about it, he goes, Mum, pseudoscience. And I say, metaphysics.
Yeah.
The metaphysical side of quantum physics.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and how really that I love it because he talks about, our brains and how we work, and how if we keep going round the same grooves, our brains, like neurologically, we keep going through the same thoughts, which create the same actions, and which can, cause us pain or unhappiness. And how if how we can, through things like meditation and changing our patterns and habits, that we can change our lives and change ourselves. And I find that very exciting.
I love that. Didn't he have an accident or something as well? And then he thought about himself back to health, or I've watched some of his YouTube videos as well. And I think he's in Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, which I watched in the 90s. And that was a transformational movie for me. And I think he might be in The Secret too. I'm not sure.
I think he is, yeah. I'm not sure of his backstory, but I just love reading about the brain and meditation and how that we can, I guess, tap into our greater consciousness, our superconscious
Yeah.
consciousness, which, some might call our soul, our spirit, and to operate from that space rather than necessarily just, going along having like the same thoughts, the same actions. So that's what I'm a bit into at the moment. So looking at breaking my own habits.
Yeah.
And one of them I really love, thank you, Lauren, for asking me on, because part of my thing has been to really challenge myself and communicate and get out there. So I'm sort of experimenting with these things in myself. I am a meditator and I do yoga. So that's over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, that's helped me to really reset and change my own well, not just my body, but how my emotions, my mind. So yeah, that's the book I'm reading. They're the kind of books that I find a bit sexy,
Yeah, no, but they are, because that kind of stuff is cool. I mean, when I think about it, why wouldn't you want to become the best version of yourself? I mean, you know what I've got on my I've got a Pinterest board. Anyway, I found a photo of a really fit looking woman, right? And I have that photo saved because that's the kind of body that I want. So I like look at her and I go, yeah. And then I go for my run and I just imagine that I've already got that, because I believe that, I can transform my life and my body to be however it is. I mean, I'm still working through some knee pain, right? And one thing I learned when I was 18 from the movie What the Bleep Do We Know is, what you send energy to grows, right?
Yeah,
and so
that's right.
And I was noticing for the last 2 weeks, oh, my knee hurts, and oh, hey, can I tell you about my knee pain for a minute? Random stranger, not really, but basically that idea. And then I thought, no, I need to stop doing that. So I started actually just consciously sending love to it, and I drew some hearts on my knee to try to get it to heal itself. And slowly and surely it's getting there.
Well, you're changing your brain pattern. You're making your mind think of something else. And I mean, what the mind actually controls pain in the body. The pain's not coming from the knee, it's the message going to the brain.
Yeah. And, Joe's work, I'll put some links to his stuff as well in the show notes, because I just sort of rediscovered him actually the other day, his YouTube videos and stuff. So I have never read his books, but he's so articulate and passionate about what he's talking about that, I'll definitely be sure to get a couple of his books as well, because I just think that you can have the best life possible if you just take responsibility completely to do it. And it's on you.
Yeah. But also, I think the other thing that's important, Lauren, is when things aren't going well, sometimes that's the part of the process too, that we are not just little individuals who can control the universe. No, it happens. We all affect each other.
Yeah.
So I think there's a danger too in believing that we are in control of everything.
Well, we're not in control of other people, that's for sure.
Because
no, that's true.
Some things, because that can really make people feel horrible, that it's their fault that they're in that situation, or that sometimes it isn't. It's to do with the collective, how everybody in that environment is behaving. So I feel like it's like the microcosm, affects the macrocosm, but also the macrocosm affects the microcosm. So the individuals, it can affect the bigger world, but the bigger world is affecting the individual as well.
For sure. And I will say, though, that everyone has a spark, even if it's just a spark of resilience within them. And the more that they love themselves, I think, and focus on that, as hard as it may be, the more that will grow, I think.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think where we're, in our lowest low, that we we do find that spark, and it's amazingly powerful, even usually at those times of crisis.
Yeah.
That we can have that realization and get in touch with our power, inner power,
Yeah.
and spiritual existence.
Yeah. Well, we'll end it there. Cassandra, that's been a fabulous interview. I understand that you have offered generously, thank you, a 10% off reading for our listeners. If when they contact you, they put in the promo code, the Afterlight, and I'll put those details in the show notes as well. Cassandra, just because I like to put you on the spot sometimes, it would be fabulous if maybe you'd come back on the show end of November, early December, and we can kind of recap everything that's happened in November and see sort of, maybe we can talk a little bit about how things are looking for the next 6 months, and you can be a featured guest on the show.
Oh, I'd love to do that, Lauren.
Yeah.
I feel we have a lovely rapport. I've so enjoyed today.
Me too.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Much.
Well, that's going to be great. So we'll see, what happens in a few months, and where the world's at, I guess. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. See you soon.
See ya. Hi, thanks so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review where you get your podcasts. And be sure to share it with your friends. Thanks.